Good morning, friends. The human heart is restless. It wrestles with the unknown, agonizes over unanswered prayers, and seeks solutions where only silence seems to answer. We demand results, explanations, and tangible proof that God is working in our lives. But God, in His wisdom, moves beyond what we see, weaving something greater than we can understand. God's unseen work is greater than what we perceive. We live in a world that demands immediate results, where progress is measured by what is seen and success by what is tangible. Yet, God's ways are higher, His movements often hidden from human sight. The earth turns unnoticed beneath our feet. The seeds sprout beneath the soil before breaking through, and the tides shift by the pull of an unseen force. So it is with God's work in our lives. When we see nothing, He is moving. When we feel nothing, He is still present. When we think all is still, the foundation of something greater is being laid. It is easy to mistake silence for absence, yet throughout history God has worked in the quiet, in the waiting, in the hidden places of the soul. Joseph sat in a prison cell, forgotten by men but never by God. The years of silence were not years of neglect, but of preparation, shaping him for a calling far beyond his understanding. When the time was right, the doors opened, not by the hands of men, but by the hand of God, who had never ceased working behind the scenes. In Bible we are said that He who began a good work in us will carry it to completion. This promise is not dependent on our understanding or ability to see His progress. If God has planted the seed, He will ensure its growth, even when we do not see the roots spreading beneath the surface. We are too quick to judge the work of God by the season we are in, forgetting that winter does not mean death, but preparation for the spring. Consider the disciples on the storm-tossed sea, straining at the oars, believing themselves alone in their struggle. Yet Christ had not abandoned them. He walked toward them on the waves, proving that the very thing they feared was under His feet. Their distress did not mean God had stopped working. It meant that He was about to reveal His power in a way they had never seen before. If we were to judge a story by the middle, we would think the hero is defeated. If we were to look only at the night, we would think the sun had vanished. But the story is still unfolding, and the dawn is certain. The moments of uncertainty, of waiting, of questioning, are not evidence of God's absence, but proof that He is still writing. His hand is in every detail, orchestrating a masterpiece that will only be fully revealed in time. We do not need to see every step to know that He is leading. We do not need to understand every turn to trust that He is guiding. The greatest works of God are often hidden until they are complete, and in those moments when we see nothing, we must remember God is still working. Rest is not idleness, but trust. We often mistake rest for inactivity, believing that to be still is to do nothing. But true rest is not the absence of effort, it is the presence of trust. The birds of the air do not store up for themselves, yet they are fed. The lilies of the field neither toil nor spin, yet they are clothed in splendor. If creation itself is sustained by the hand of God, how much more will He care for those whom He has called His own? In Bible we are said that those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar on wings like eagles, run and not grow weary, walk and not be faint. This is not a call to cease moving forward, but to move with confidence, knowing that the burden is not ours to carry alone. The world tells us that rest must be earned, that we can only pause once the work is finished. But in the kingdom of God, rest is not a reward, it is a posture of faith. When Christ stood before the storm-tossed sea and spoke, "Peace, be still," the winds obeyed, but the greater lesson was for the disciples. They had feared the storm because they had forgotten who was in the boat with them. If the one who holds the universe in his hands is present, then fear is powerless and striving is unnecessary. The waves may rise, but they cannot overturn the plans of God. We toil, we struggle, and we grasp at control because we believe that everything depends on our effort. But the hands that shape the stars and knit us together in the womb have never lost their strength. In Bible we are said that, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. We exhaust ourselves trying to hold together what was never ours to sustain. Yet God calls us to lay down our burdens, to take upon ourselves the yoke that is easy and the burden that is light. This is not because life is without hardship, but because He carries the weight for us. To rest in God is not to abandon responsibility, but to surrender anxiety. It is to walk forward without fear, knowing that the outcome is already secure. It is to trust that even in the silence, God is still working. When the Israelites stood before the Red Sea, pursued by their enemies, they saw only an impossible situation. But in Bible, we are said that the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. The waters parted, not by their striving, but by His command. They did not need to know the way forward. They only needed to trust the one who led them. If we could see the full picture, we would not fear, but we walk by faith, not by sight. And faith is not found in endless striving, but in quiet confidence that God is faithful. Faith grows in the waiting. The human heart resists delay, longing for immediate answers and visible progress. Yet, the most profound transformations do not happen in moments of ease, but in seasons of waiting. A seed, once planted, does not sprout overnight. It is hidden beneath the soil, unseen and unnoticed, yet deep within, a process is unfolding. The roots stretch downward before the stem pushes upward, ensuring a foundation strong enough to sustain its growth. If the process were rushed, if the seed were forced to break the surface too soon, it would not survive. In the same way, faith is strengthened not in the moments of instant clarity, but in the times when we cannot see what God is doing. Abraham was given a promise, yet years passed before its fulfillment. He walked under the same sky, looked at the same stars, and wondered when the promise would come to pass. Every day of waiting was a test of trust, a choice to believe that God's word was true, even when circumstances suggested otherwise. In Bible, we are said that hope that is seen is no hope at all, for who hopes for what they already have? It is in the unseen, in the longing, in the stretching of time, that faith is refined. The delay was never about denial, but preparation, both for Abraham and for the generations to come. Waiting often feels like silence, but silence does not mean absence. The disciples must have felt abandoned in the space between the crucifixion and the resurrection. Their hope seemed buried with their master, and the weight of uncertainty must have been crushing. Yet, what they could not see was that even in the depths of the grave, God was still working. What they perceived as an ending was, in reality, the beginning of the greatest victory. In Bible, we are said that those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. The waiting is never wasted, for God is always at work beneath the surface, shaping, refining, and preparing for what is to come. Joseph sat in a prison cell, accused and forgotten, yet every moment was leading him toward the fulfillment of his purpose. If he had been freed too soon, he would not have been in the right place at the right time to save a nation. Every delay was divine positioning. In Bible, we are said that God makes everything beautiful in its time. That time is often longer than we expect, but it is never without purpose. A tree does not resist the passing of seasons, nor does it fear the winter, for it knows that beneath the frost, life continues. When the warmth of spring returns, what was once dormant bursts forth in splendor. So it is with faith. The waiting may feel endless, but God is never late. He is working in the unseen, strengthening the roots of faith, ensuring that when the time comes, what He has planted will stand firm. God's timing is perfect, even when it feels delayed. Human nature wrestles with the idea of waiting, wanting results on our own terms and within our own schedules. Yet, time itself is in the hands of God, who sees the end from the beginning. The unfolding of His plans is never rushed, never late, but always aligned with His perfect wisdom. What we perceive as a delay is often a necessary preparation, ensuring that both the circumstances and our hearts are ready for what He has ordained. In Bible, we are said that there is a time for everything, a season for every purpose under heaven. It is not for us to dictate when the season should change, but to trust the one who governs them. Martha and Mary called for Jesus when their brother Lazarus was sick, believing that He would come immediately to heal him. But He delayed. Days passed, and their hope must have faded with each hour. By the time Jesus arrived, Lazarus had been in the grave for 4 days. To them it was too late. The opportunity had passed. But what seemed like an irreversible loss was in reality a divine setup for something greater. If Jesus had come earlier, they would have seen a healing. Instead, they witnessed a resurrection. In Bible, we are said that His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts higher than our thoughts. The waiting was not neglect, it was intentional, designed to reveal a greater measure of God's power than they had imagined. Joseph dreamed of greatness, yet the path to that destiny led him through betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. Every setback seemed to push him further from what God had promised. But the delays were not detours. They were the very steps that positioned him for his calling. If he had been freed from prison too soon, he would not have been in the right place to interpret Pharaoh's dream. If he had reached the palace at the wrong time, he would not have been able to save his family and countless others from famine. What looked like wasted years were, in truth, divine preparation. In Bible, we are said that though the vision may tarry, it will surely come to pass in its appointed time. What God has spoken will not fail, though it may unfold differently than we expect. The disciples expected a Messiah who would establish His kingdom immediately, overthrowing oppression and ruling in power. But Christ did not move according to their timeline. Instead, He walked the road to Calvary, choosing suffering over immediate triumph. Yet in that very delay, the greatest victory was won, not just for a nation but for all of humanity. In Bible we are said that at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. Even salvation itself came not according to man's expectation, but in the fullness of God's perfect timing. What seems slow to us is not slow to God, for He is never late. The waiting is not a sign of inaction, but a sign that He is preparing something beyond what we can yet understand. God works through our struggles, not apart from them. It is easy to believe that God's presence is most evident in times of peace and prosperity, but the truth is that His greatest works are often revealed in the midst of trials. Struggles are not signs of abandonment, but evidence that something is being refined, shaped, and strengthened within us. A sculptor does not create by leaving the stone untouched, but by chiseling away at it, removing what is unnecessary to reveal what was always meant to be. In the same way, the challenges we face are not meaningless. They are part of a divine process, designed to shape us into who we are meant to become. In Bible, we are said that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. What feels like breaking is often building. Joseph's journey was filled with hardship. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, wrongfully imprisoned. From the outside, it seemed as if his life was unraveling. Yet in every trial, God was positioning him for his destiny. What others meant for harm, God was turning for good. Had he not endured the pit, he would not have reached the palace. Had he not faced injustice, he would not have been in the right place at the right time to interpret Pharaoh's dream and save nations from famine. Struggles were not obstacles to his calling. They were the very means by which God brought it to pass. In Bible, we are said that all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose. Even what seems painful and unfair is being woven into something greater. The Israelites stood trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, facing what seemed like certain destruction. But what looked like an impossible situation was an opportunity for God to demonstrate His power. The sea parted, not before they faced fear, but in the midst of it. The path to their deliverance was made through the very waters they had feared. Struggles are not barriers to God's work. They are often the stage upon which He reveals His glory. In Bible we are said that though we walk through the fire, we will not be burned, and though we pass through the waters, they will not overwhelm us. The struggle is not the end of the story, it is the place where God shows Himself faithful. Even Christ Himself, though without sin, did not fulfill His purpose apart from suffering. The road to resurrection went through the cross. It was in His wounds that healing was found, in His suffering that redemption was accomplished. If God's greatest work in history came through pain, why would we assume that our own journeys would be free of struggle? In Bible, we are said that momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. What we endure is not meaningless. It is the very process by which God's power is revealed and His purposes fulfilled. The moments of uncertainty, of waiting, of questioning, are not evidence of God's absence, but proof that He is still writing. A story is not finished in the middle, and a masterpiece is not complete until every stroke of the artist's hand has been placed with purpose. Life often feels like a series of unfinished sentences. where the next chapter is unclear and the resolution seems distant. Yet the author of life is not bound by human timelines, nor does he abandon the story before its intended conclusion. In Bible, we are said that he who began a good work in us will carry it on to completion. What seems like delay or silence is often the careful construction of something greater than we can yet perceive. Job sat in the ashes of loss, questioning why everything had been taken from him. His wealth, his health, his family, gone in an instant. The pain was real and the answers were not immediate, but God had not stopped writing his story. What Job saw as devastation was not the final word, and in time, restoration came beyond what he had imagined. In Bible we are said that though we may suffer for a little while, the God of all grace will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish us. The unwritten pages of his life held more than he could see, and the same is true for every life that trusts in the hands of God. When the disciples walked the road to Emmaus after the crucifixion, they spoke of Christ in the past tense, believing that the story had ended. Their hopes seemed buried with him, and their dreams of a coming kingdom had crumbled. Yet they did not realize that the very one they mourned was walking beside them, alive, victorious, and still working in ways they had yet to understand. Their sorrow did not mean God's plan had failed. It only meant that they had not yet seen the full picture. In Bible we are said that we walk by faith, not by sight. What seems unfinished to us is fully known by him, and the path that appears uncertain is already laid out before us. Peter, after denying Christ, must have believed that his calling was over. Shame and regret weighed heavily on him, and the thought of redemption may have felt impossible, but Christ had not given up on him. In the Bible, we are said that God's mercies are new every morning. The failure Peter saw as final was merely a turning point in a much greater plan. He was not discarded, but restored, strengthened, and entrusted with a mission greater than himself. A weaver does not display a tapestry before it is finished. From the underside, the threads appear tangled, messy, without meaning. But when the work is complete, the design is revealed in its beauty. Life is much the same. The struggles, the waiting, the questions, all are threads in the hands of a master craftsman, forming a picture we cannot yet see. The story is still unfolding, and the author has not put down his pen. God is still writing your story, even when you cannot see the full picture. What feels unfinished, uncertain, or delayed is not forgotten. It is being woven into something greater. In Bible, we are said that he makes all things beautiful in his time. The waiting, the struggles, and the unanswered prayers are not signs of his absence, but of his careful, intentional work in your life. Job's suffering was not the end. The disciples' sorrow was not the conclusion. Peter's failure was not final. Every moment of pain or doubt was met with restoration, victory, and purpose. In Bible, we are said that all things work together for good for those who love God. A masterpiece is not rushed, and a story is not abandoned before its fulfillment. Trust that God's hands are still at work. Rest now, for he is working in your life, even in the unseen.